Hi guys, Goffy here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about what is potentially the most controversial piece of Leica gear out there, and that is the Visoflex. It is essentially an EVF for your camera, which for many people kind of ruins the whole point of getting a Leica M in the first place, which is the rangefinder. But in today's video, I want to talk to you about whether or not they're useful or if they just completely ruin the point. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Goffy, you clearly think they're worthwhile because you own one. But I haven't really gone out and bought one at all. I've actually owned two of them now. I've owned the Type 20 or Type 02 or TP02. I'll put it up on the screen now. And also this Visoflex 2 that I've got here today. But I've never actually bought one. I've actually just got them bundled with cameras that I've wanted. So when I bought the Leica M10 a few years back, I got that Type 20 version. And then when I bought the M11 recently, it came with the Visoflex 2. So I've never actually gone out and bought one. I've never specifically thought, I want one, let's get one. Instead, I've just kind of had them bundled in, so I've used them because I've got them. And in today's video, yeah, I want to run through the pros and the cons. And I think we're going to start with the pros, go through all of the things they're really helpful for, but there are some negatives, but we'll save them for the end. Now, there is supposed to be a path through here, and there kind of is one, but it is pretty tight at the same time. I'm trying to work out whether to go through it or walk around. I'm not sure. I've decided to walk through it, and it is a bit of a shambles, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about the first good thing and also make a little bit of a confession about this video. I have tried to record this video maybe 5 times now, and I am going to use images from the same area, but over maybe 5 different days, because I've honestly tried to shoot it 5 times. Now, on one of those days, we actually spoke about one of my favorite things using the Visoflex for, that is portraits. Sometimes, especially with a longer lens, like my 50mm, trying to shoot wide open at reasonably close distances can be quite hard through the rangefinder, and having the EVF just means I don't miss. So that's probably my main personal use case, is shooting portraits, and I'll show you some of the ones that we took earlier in the week, but definitely not today. This stuff has been a nightmare. I'm absolutely surrounded by it. I think it's rapeseed that's gone, like the flowers have gone, the bright yellow ones, and now we're just left with these like little seeds. But trying to get down this path has been a nightmare. Now, the other important use case that I don't currently make much use of, but I will be in the future, is using lenses that aren't really made to be used with a rangefinder. Now, these can be really wide lenses. So lenses wider than about 28mm, you just can't use the rangefinder for framing. What a lot of people do instead is they get a little optical viewfinder that goes on the top, but then you kind of have to hop between the two. You need to use the rangefinder to focus, but then the viewfinder on top to compose. Now, with a wide lens, arguably it doesn't matter that much, because a lot of the time you're probably just zone focusing and getting away with it. But the opposite end of that is if you're using a really long lens. Now, I do want to try out a long lens. I'm really torn between a 75 and a 90mm lens. If you guys have got any experience with the cheaper sort of lenses in that sort of focal range, then let me know, because I'd love to know what lens you think I should get. 75mm, 90mm, open to recommendations. But at them longer lengths, the rangefinder obviously doesn't zoom in, so the kind of framing section of your rangefinder gets really small, and it can also be hard to focus if you get a fast one. And then I guess continuing on with the lenses, then if you want to use lenses that aren't rangefinder coupled, for example, R-mount lenses, I think this again is something I'd like to try out in the future. They aren't rangefinder coupled, but they're incredible lenses and can be picked up at a really good price as well. So that's definitely a consideration. If you're using lenses or like focal lengths that don't really work with rangefinders, then you could use the LCD, but a lot of people do prefer using an EVF over an LCD. It's a little bit easier on days like today where it's bright and sunny. Another thing that makes these viewfinders super helpful is when you want to get low down, because with a rangefinder, it's actually really hard to shoot photos this low down because you can't see through the rangefinder unless you literally get on the floor. The other thing as well is because none of the M cameras have a tilting LCD, you can't just tilt the LCD out and get these low images. And because the viewfinder tilts up, you can treat it a little bit like a waist level finder and look down into the camera. That enables you to get shots that aren't easy to get without it. And I think this is one of these things that I only realize when I've got it, because when I've got it, I get down and I shoot these images. And if I don't have this EVF with me, then, well, I basically just don't bother. So maybe there is some value in bringing this with me, because it means I get shots that On other days without it, I just wouldn't have bothered getting. Another example that is really hard to explain unless you've used a rangefinder is if you've got situations like this field where there's lots of detail and it all kind of overlaps with each other, trying to focus on the piece of like plant over there that you want to focus on through the rangefinder patch is really hard to do because there's just too much going on. Again, the EVF, when it punches in, makes picking out certain plants in this like bunch of plants behind me far easier. There are other situations that I'm struggling to think about where this sort of thing happens. You want to pick out a subject in a really busy scene, but there's just too much going on in it that it's really hard to line up the rangefinder patch with the specific thing that you're looking at, specific thing that you're looking at. It only makes sense if you've used one before, but you'll know the scenarios I mean, where it's just really hard to focus for some reason because of all the detail in a scene. That's again where the EVF can be super helpful. Now, let's get started with the bad, and most of it comes down to the build and design. And we're going to start off with the Type 20 or Type 02, TP02, whatever it's called, up on the screen. Now, when we look at the build and design of this, inside it has a resolution that is similar to a Fuji X-T2. If you use one, you'll instantly think to yourself, if you've used a modern camera, this feels a little bit behind the times. Then when you move on to like the actual build quality and the design of it, the build is fully plastic, like every part of it is plastic. And then the design, it's just a bit bonkers. It looks awful in my opinion, absolutely awful. It's not a nice looking EVF at all. I think it was initially made for one of the TL cameras and then it also worked with some M cameras, but still, even on that camera, I think it looked pretty ridiculous. So it works for everything that we've spoken about, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel like it's up to today's standards. Then let's talk about the Visoflex 2, the one I've got here with me today on my M11, and I think it came out at the same time this did. So it was actually designed with the M in mind, not the TL. Now, I think the design of it, it looks a little bit better. It still doesn't look great. By any means, this is not a pretty looking EVF. But importantly, the build quality was also ramped up. It is a all metal body, and it feels like, at least feels like you're getting your money's worth. When it comes to the megapixels inside, it's got a similar resolution to the X-T5, which is pretty good. It feels modern, but it is also not class leading. The X-H2S has a lot more megapixels in there. I think it's a whole like 2 extra. I think we're talking 3 versus 5. So there's quite a big difference still with like flagship, but it feels modern, which is great. However, there's then some weird design omissions compared to the previous model. The previous model, even though it was fully made out of plastic, the bit that actually came into contact with your eye was made out of like a soft touch plastic. This, even though it's all metal, the bit that actually touches your eye is made out of like the worst feeling plastic ever. Honestly, it feels ridiculously cheap. And then we get to the diopter. On the old model, it had a little setting on it, a little line on it that showed you where neutral was, and then obviously positive and negative values. This one, it doesn't show you where the neutral setting is. So I know I've got all right eyesight, but I have to like mess around with it to find out where the normal setting is. I know you only have to find it once and set it, but it's still a little bit annoying that it doesn't have the neutral setting on there. It'd be really helpful because most people know whether they're like positive or negative when it comes to their eyesight. So yeah, the build quality is noticeably better. It's up to kind of like today's standards in terms of performance. The build is better, but it's really questionable and missing some of the weird design sort of features that the previous model had. So in conclusion then, what do I think? Do I think it's pointless? No. Let's start with that. I don't think it's pointless. I think anybody that's used a rangefinder camera for long enough will know there are times when a rangefinder is just not the right answer. And for some people, some of the time, that will mean having an EVF is super helpful. For some other people, they'll say, well, that's where a rangefinder forces me to treat things differently and push me down like a different creative path. And for that, I say fair play. I say fair play as well. Now, I said at the start of this video that I've never actually bought one. So if I didn't own them, would I go out and buy one? I don't think I would. Now, the main reason is all of the pros that I've spoken about today just aren't things that I do very often. Portraits, I can get away with using the rangefinder, shooting down low, I don't shoot down low that much. Adapting weird and wonderful lenses, I just don't do it, but I want to do it in the future. And because of that, That's why I've not sold them. That's why I still own the Visoflex 2. I am going to sell the Type 02 or Tippy 02, whatever it's called, because I don't need any more. But right now, based on today's circumstances, I probably would sell it. But based on the things I want to do in the future, I'm going to keep it because I want to try out some longer lenses. I want to adapt some lenses that aren't rangefinder coupled and just have a little bit of a play around. And I got these kind of for free. The price that I paid for the M11 was a good price regardless of the fact that the Visoflex was thrown in. So there we have it then. Hopefully that has helped you guys understand it. If you're somebody that didn't understand why anyone would want one, or if you're thinking about buying one, maybe it helped explain why you might want one, my use case, and what they're like to use. If you've enjoyed today's video, please do not forget to like and subscribe. There is plenty more Leica, Fuji and travel content coming to the channel very, very soon. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.